Kate Mila Falcha, welcome to Irish Granny Helen. And today we are finally going to address chapter 1 of the book, The Spirits book by Allan Kardec. Now, I don't know how far we'll get into chapter 1. It's only a couple of pages, but there's a lot to cover here, and I don't want to just gloss over it. I'll tell you now what my plan is. We're going to see how this works out. I'm not sure yet. But I have a friend who's very familiar with this book who is going to join me to do the discussions in these chapters. And they actually put forth the discussion of what you should talk about. But I felt like I should come on here before we do that, before we record that, and very briefly go over how the book addresses these topics. It sort of summarizes them. Let me turn off my heater. We had snow last night, so okay. Chapter 1, little topic, not all that big of a deal. God, that's chapter 1. And these chapters are divided into headings, and then each heading has a series of facts and then a discussion topic, and then we move on. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4 different topics here. We'll see how long it takes us to get through them. It's not a lot of factual information. It's concepts to think about. So chapter 1, God, and part 1, God and the infinite. So what he's doing here is answering the obvious questions that people might have, and these answers are coming, according to Kardec, from the spirits in the spirit world. So the first question is, what is God? This reminds me of the Baltimore Catechism. What is God? The answer is from the spirits. God is the supreme intelligence, the first cause of all things. How should we define infinite? That which has no beginning and no end. We learned this in the first grade. I think about that now. I can't imagine too many first graders. I remember sitting contemplating God always was and always will be, and blowing my little 6-year-old mind. Anyway, can we say that God is infinite? And the answer is, in this case, your definition is incomplete. Unfortunately, human language is incapable of expressing ideas that transcend human intelligence. Well, that's a diss. Okay, so this is the discussion for this one little part. In perfection, God is infinite, but God is also more than the infinite, and we make an error in logic when we equate the two. A quality possessed by a being cannot be considered identical to the being itself. So you may love chocolate, but that doesn't make you chocolate, is what they're saying. Bad example. Furthermore, infinity is an abstraction. To define something unknown like God by reference to something equally unknown is once again to make an error in logic. I wasn't real great at logic in school. I'm not, I guess, entirely a logical person. I may be more driven by emotion, but we'll just leave that for the moment. But I do know from grammar or from language that you don't define a word by using that word. And I think this is the philosophical equivalent of that. So that's God and the infinite. God is supreme, the first cause. Infinity has no beginning and no end. Is God infinite? False equation, a false dichotomy. You can't do that. And this will be the first topic that we discuss. Then we move on to proof of God's existence. And the question is asked, what are the proofs of God's existence? So he's a very rational person, surprisingly enough. And he says, and this is coming from the spirits, an axiom in science states, quote, there is no effect without a cause. Look for the cause of things which are not the work of human beings, and your reason will provide the answer. So in that light, the discussion is to assure ourselves of the existence of God, we have only to look at the works of creation. The universe exists, therefore, it must have a cause. To doubt the existence of a first cause is to deny the axiom that every effect has a cause, and to assume that something can be created from nothing. So that ought to be a fun discussion. God's existence seems to be universally intuited. In other words, globally and chronologically, this seems to be a ubiquitous belief for most cultures. What can we conclude from this fact that it is so universally intuited? Now, I suppose we can debate that. That'll be part of the discussion. And their answer, what we can conclude is that God exists. And God is the term, remember now, human vocabulary is limited. God is the term for the source of creation. We're not talking about God in an anthropomorphic sense. God's not an old guy with the beard sitting on a golden throne. That's somebody else. That's hard to separate, but we have to keep that in the back of our mind. Ask yourself how and why the human mind would possess this intuition if it has no basis in reality. Why would we instinctively feel this? This is simply an extension of the axiom that there is no effect without a cause. If you can remember back to when you were a young child, and this won't apply to everybody because some people are indoctrinated from day one, but if you can remember back to a time when you really didn't know a whole lot about religion and structural institutional belief and philosophy, inherently in your heart, how did you feel about yourself and the world around you? I remember, and that's something we'll talk about. It's simply an extension of the axiom that there is no effect without a cause and God must exist. Can't our intuitive sense of God's existence be explained as the result of formal education and cultural influence? And the answer is, if that's so, how does it happen that even primitive cultures possess a sense of God? And we'll discuss this, but my argument would be because it's passed down from their elders who they respect. That'll be a good debate. If the intuition of the existence of a supreme being were due solely to education, this intuition would not be universal. Like certain scientific notions, it would be found only among the people who were educated to it. So the actual concept, he's saying, is a product of cultural education, and not all cultures are taught. I guess the way to look at it would be pantheistic societies or animistic societies. Can we find the first cause of things in the essential properties of matter? What in that case would be the cause of those properties? Laws of physics. Okay, who made up the laws? That's what he's getting at. To credit the beginning of all things to the essential properties of matter is to mistake an effect for a cause, since properties are themselves effects. Somebody had to make the properties up. Somebody had to codify this stuff. Somebody had to come up with the laws of nature, the concept of nature. What about the view that the creation of all things resulted from chance combinations of matter? And he just calls that absurdity, which I think is a point of view. But you can't make something from nothing. That would be the big thing. The harmony that regulates the workings of the universe reveals a plan which by its very nature posits the existence of an intelligent power. Consequently, it makes no sense to attribute the origin of all things to chance. Chance cannot produce anything like the creations of intelligence. If chance had the properties of intelligence, it would not be chance. So if you look at the word chance as happenstance and you use that to define where everything comes from, it just happens accidentally at some point. His argument is everything is too sophisticated, too intricate. When you start studying things like embryology or plasma physics or astronomy, start studying things like that, you begin to realize how deeply convoluted and intricate and sophisticated reality is. It's kind of hard to think of it as happenstance. And I want to make it clear here, I'm not arguing in favor of belief or no belief. I'm arguing in favor of reading the book. Okay, what proof is there that the first cause of all things is a supreme intelligence superior to all other intelligence? The Spirit's answer is, you have a proverb: the workman is known by his work. Look at the work around you. From it alone, you can assume the presence of a workman. Some people have such a high opinion of themselves that they can't grasp the simple truth in this proverb. For them, the notion of a superior being is simply inadmissible. Poor souls who could be felled by the mere breath of God. Oh, who could be felled by the mere breath of God. And the discussion is, we judge the power of an intelligence by its works. By the works you shall know them. Since no human being could have created the natural environment around us, the first cause must therefore be an intelligence superior to ours. And human intelligence must itself have a cause. The greatness of our intellectual achievements only emphasizes the extraordinary quality of this cause, of which our intelligence is an effect, whatever names we choose to give it. Vocabulary is inadequate. This supreme intelligence is the first cause of all things. And I will interject here. If you remember the conversation I had with that wonderful man, Dr. Ogi Ogas, who is some kind of experimental theoretical mathematician and neurological anatomical. He's real smart. He's a genius. He was a Harvard fellow. And he came and talked about his experience with beings from elsewhere. But he's also written a bunch of books. And I have actually prepared one of his books. And I haven't covered it because I can barely understand it. And I think it would be a nice contrast to this book, because this book presupposes a supreme source. And his book starts at the other end and talks about the evolution from virtually nothing to something extremely complex, and shows how things evolved. It's very interesting. Hesitated to do it. It's that complicated. But maybe we can do it together. We'll have to see. In the meantime, attributes of God. Can any individual understand the essential nature of God? And the answer he received is no, human beings lack the capability for such understanding. I could have told you that in the first grade. Will we ever be able to comprehend the mystery of God? And the answer is, when human beings have advanced sufficiently, when they have overcome the yoke of matter, they will be better able to comprehend God. So our discussion here is, the limited nature of our human faculties prevents us from having an understanding of God's essential nature. As a result, in the early stages of human development, we often confuse the Creator with the creation and attributed to the former the qualities of the latter. However, as we progress spiritually, we are able to penetrate the nature of things more deeply and form a more just and rational idea of God, though our ideas will always be incomplete. And I think many scientists have kind of hinted at this. Messages people have received from other dimensions, other beings, reiterate this. We've sort of reached the limit of our potential of DNA. And, Denise always says we've got some kind of inherent flaw. But the story is that cyclically, over time, that wheel of fortune, that cycle of the world, we've risen to challenges and failed to meet them properly. And then they've been presented again and failed to meet them properly. And we're at one of those moments. And so how long will that challenge to our ability to overcome the limitations of our DNA? How long will that continue? Okay. In the early stages of human development, we often confuse the I already read that. If we cannot understand the essential nature of God, can we have at least some idea of God's perfections? The answer is yes, some of them. You will understand them better as you raise yourself above the matter. And naturally, your mind will have glimpses of them. And I think this is in keeping with a lot of, New Age belief, a lot of philosophical belief. A lot of the ancients believed this. There's an energy, a vibration. And as we elevate our energy and our vibration, we're better able to communicate with the higher realms. Not a great explanation, but when we say that God is eternal, infinite, unchangeable, immaterial, unique, all-powerful, sovereignly just and good, aren't we expressing a complete idea of the qualities of the divine? This book is, these spirits, man, they are full of snark. So their answer is yes, from your point of view. But don't think that you sum up everything in these terms. You must understand that there are things that transcend the capacity of even the most intelligent person and that outstrip the power of language to express. However, your reason tells you correctly that God must possess the perfections you mention in the supreme degree. Lacking one of them or having less than the absolute degree in any one of them, God would be less than perfect. And in order to be above all things, to be almighty, God must have no imperfections. So once again, just to refresh not to fall into old patterns, we're not talking God a man, God a human, God in any way anthropomorphic or manifest in a corporeal sense. This is a term used for the source, the all-powerful source. And we don't know how to define that. That's what this book is about. So God is infinite and eternal, and if we assume a beginning to God's existence, we must mean that God either sprang from nothing or was created by some other being. Our realization that this is not true leads us to our ideas of infinity and eternity. Back to first grade. God always was and always will be. God is unchangeable. If this were otherwise, universal laws would have no stability. And there's nothing more immutable than universal law. They are set in stone, cannot be changed. God is immaterial and by nature differs from everything we call matter. Without this quality, God would not be unchangeable and would be subject to the transformations of matter, because change is the only consistent reality in the world of the material. God is unique. If there were more than one God, there would be neither unity of plan nor unity of power in the ordering of the universe. We'll talk about that. God is all-powerful. The possession of anything less than sovereign power would indicate the existence of something more powerful than or equally powerful to God. Without sovereign power, God could not have created all things, and those things not created by one God would be the work of another God. God is sovereignly just and good. The wisdom of the divine laws is revealed as clearly in the smallest things as in the greatest. This wisdom makes it impossible to doubt either God's justice or goodness, which brings to mind the magician, as above, so below. Pantheism. Is God a being distinct from the universe, or, as some people believe, the result of all the forces and intelligences of the universe? I have a comment about that. The latter view makes God an effect and not a cause. But as we have stated, God is the first cause, and it is impossible to be both cause and effect at the same time. But do not doubt God's existence. This is the one essential point. To go beyond it is to lose yourself in a maze. Nor in the end will such explorations make you a better person. They might, in fact, do harm by adding to your pride and leading you to believe incorrectly that you know something others do not. Don't waste your time on these theories. You have enough to think about in the here and now, beginning with yourselves. Study your own imperfections and try to get rid of them. This course is far more profitable than trying to penetrate the impenetrable. I think that's probably good advice. We'll have to talk about that. But there have been messages given to people that the laws of physics, the laws of the world, the behavior, natural law. I don't know whether I should use plural or singular. Is God, our God. So we'll have to talk about that. What is your view concerning pantheism, which states that all natural bodies, beings, and planets are part of God and taken together make up the essence of God? The response is humanity, unable to become God, is eager to become at least a part of God. Pantheists claim that their belief demonstrates some of God's qualities. They argue that since worlds are infinite in number, God must be infinite, and that since empty spaces do not exist, God must be everywhere. Then they conclude that since God is everywhere, God must be everything, and thus the intelligent cause of the universe. How can we counter this argument? And the spirits retort, with the dictates of reason. Think of the assumptions behind the notion, and you will have no trouble seeing its fundamental flaws. So the discussion here is the pantheist doctrine makes God into a material being. While crediting God with supreme intelligence, the pantheist actually sees the divine as a human being drawn on a vast scale. God is just a big, gigantic, more powerful being. So what's the result? This is what they believe. So what's the result? If constituted of matter, God would have no intrinsic stability because of entropy and all is change, flux and change. Since matter is constantly being transformed, that's inherent. Furthermore, lacking changelessness, which is one of the essential qualities of divinity, God would also be subject to all the frailties and needs of human beings. In reality, using the properties of matter to describe God degrades our idea of the divine. We cannot address some of these concepts with our inadequate ability to communicate with words. It's just very difficult. Ultimately, however, such subtle arguments fail to solve the problem of God's essential nature. We do not know all that God is. We do know what God is not. Pantheism, on the other hand, confuses creator with creation. This is the equivalent of considering an ingenious piece of equipment to be an integral part of its inventor. The intelligence of God is revealed in the work of God, just as the painter appears through the picture on a canvas. The works of God are no more God than the picture is the artist who conceived and painted it. So there's a lot here for discussion, and that's the first chapter. And I would like to invite everybody to maybe watch this again and jot down your ideas, because we're going to have discussions of this, and that'll be coming up soon. Don't hold your breath. Probably in a couple of weeks. I'm trying to find time. But it'll be a nice little surprise. So I hope this is not too cerebral for everybody. It's a lot to think about. This is my first reading of this book. I'm not even sure I understand what's going on. So please don't be intimidated by it. We'll parse this out together. But if you've gotten this far into it, thank you. Thank you for watching. People have commented that they find it interesting. Let me know if you hate it. I mean, if I get a lot of comments, people are like, oh, this is so boring, then I might rethink this. But I think it's interesting. I like to debate these concepts. And I feel like it's fun because I don't have an answer. I don't know. Just keep that in mind. God is not an old man on a throne. Slungafoil. Slanja.